There are moments in your life when time just splits. One half goes forward, the you that keeps living, smiling, moving. The other half gets stuck right there, replaying that moment over and over. For me, it happened at 5:43 p.m. on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My wedding, 204 guests, golden chandeliers, garden roses on every table, an aisle so white it looked like it could blind you, everything curated to perfection, except for the one moment no one planned for. That's when I heard my soon-to-be mother-in-law turn to a woman at her table and say, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "That's not a mother, that's a mistake in a dress." And then she laughed, as if humiliating the woman who raised me alone in front of 204 people was just another sip of champagne. And the worst part? My fiancé laughed too, not even nervously. It was that soft kind of snort laugh, like something was just too true. I stood there, holding a bouquet of peonies and panic. People say your life flashes before your eyes during car crashes, but weddings just expose it all. The truth people hid, the cracks you ignored, the parts of yourself you betrayed to keep the peace. My name's Riley. I'm an architect, and until 5:43 p.m. that day, I thought I was marrying into love. Turns out, I was marrying into a performance. My mom, Angela, was sitting in the second row, quiet, poised, wearing the same dress she'd spent 2 weeks tailoring by hand because she didn't want me to waste money on her. Her nails were chipped, her heels thrifted, and her smile forced. I could tell. That smile said, "We'll get through this. We always do." Angela raised me solo. No child support, no breaks, just late shifts at a diner and even later nights, hemming clothes for neighbors to cover rent. She didn't have a college degree, didn't have pearls or legacy, but she had grit, heart, the kind of love that never leaves, even when everything else does. The wedding program had a 2-page tribute to Carson's family. His dad, Henry, was a former state senator. His mom, Clarice, chaired the local arts council and owned a boutique design firm, whatever that meant. Their bios read like resumes, accolades, titles. My mom, just a one-line thank you to Angela for her unwavering love. No last name, no mention of everything she did so I could be standing there in that $1,200 dress. They erased her, and I let them. Then came the speeches. Carson's father stood up first. Perfect posture, voice like an old campaign ad. Ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate not just love, but elevation, the triumph of hard work, the story of a young woman who, though she comes from humble beginnings, my stomach dropped. Don't say it. Managed to rise against all odds, proof that even from modest roots, a waitress mother, I believe, you can bloom. Bloom like I was a dandelion that grew out of sidewalk cracks? Mom didn't move. She stared straight ahead, eyes locked on the cake. I wanted to scream, to grab the mic, to shout, "You don't know her. You don't know what she gave up." But I stayed seated because we don't make scenes. Then Clarice got up. "Riley is such a remarkable young woman," she began with that pinched smile of hers. "And it's clear she inherited her drive from someone. Perhaps not from formal training, but from instinct. That's what we admire about her mother, that raw, unpolished will to survive." Polite chuckles. Someone behind me whispered, "Did her mom even go to high school?" I turned. It was Carson's cousin, the same one who toasted with me at my bridal shower. I held my breath through dinner. My hand was shaking so hard I couldn't cut into my chicken. Carson reached for my hand, and I flinched. I excused myself and walked toward the patio, desperate for air. That's when I heard it. Clarice, standing with her friend by the hydrangea wall. "I mean, look at that dress," she said. "Riley's mother looks like she got lost on the way to a PTA meeting." The other woman laughed, and Clarice added, "And I swear I'll never forget this. That's not a mother, that's a mistake in a dress." I froze. She saw me and sipped her wine like nothing happened. Carson appeared behind me. "Hey," he said, "let's not get dramatic. That's just how she jokes." Just how she jokes. Was my life a punchline? Was my mom? We stood there in silence, and I remembered something Angela once said late at night after I got rejected from my dream internship. "You don't have to be like them," she whispered. "You just have to be better." So I walked back inside, took the mic from the DJ, and with the entire room watching, 204 faces frozen mid-bite, I said, "Thank you all for coming, but there will be no wedding tonight." Gasps, murmurs. Carson whispered, "You're joking." I looked at him, at Clarice, at Henry, at their carefully curated dynasty. "You mocked the wrong woman," I said, "and I won't marry into a family that treats strength like shame." And with that, I walked out, heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. The morning after the wedding was unusually silent. No hungover laughter, no clinking mimosas or family brunch chatter. Just the quiet hum of the air conditioning in our hotel suite. And the ache behind my eyes from a night I couldn't process. My husband, Caleb, hadn't come back to the room. I stared at the untouched pillow beside mine. The creases on the sheets were still mine. No scent of cologne, no warmth left behind. Just empty fabric and empty intentions. But my mom, she stayed, even after what they said, even after being laughed at. She stayed until the last guest left, helped the kitchen staff stack chairs, and then came and sat next to me on the floor of the bridal suite, holding the hem of my torn dress like it was spun gold. "I'm sorry," I whispered into the carpet. She didn't say, "It's okay." She didn't lie. She just ran her fingers through my hair and said, "I love you more than their hate will ever matter." And that undid me. When I was 8, my mother cleaned houses during the day and studied for her GED at night. I remember falling asleep in the back seat of her beat-up Toyota Corolla, the smell of bleach still on her sweater, while she mouthed math problems to herself in the front seat. We didn't have much, but I never once felt poor. She made everything feel like an adventure. Rainstorms were sky parades. Split dinners were secret recipes from the Queen. We had tea parties with broken mugs and laughed like royalty. So, no, she didn't embarrass me at my wedding. She raised me with the kind of grace money can't buy, the kind Caleb's family wouldn't recognize if it danced in front of them wearing a designer label. Caleb texted me at 10:42 a.m. "We should talk." No apology, no regret, just logistics. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the nearest cafe, still wearing my rehearsal dinner hoodie and no makeup. I ordered 2 coffees and sat outside, staring at the parking lot, until I saw a black Mercedes pull up. Caleb got out, crisp and polished like nothing had happened. Like his parents hadn't publicly humiliated my mother. Like he hadn't let them. He sat across from me and immediately went into damage control. "They didn't mean it like that," he said. "It was just a dumb joke. You know how my dad gets after a few drinks." I said nothing. He kept going. "I mean, yeah, it came off harsh, but your mom, she's tough. She can handle it. You know she can. And besides, my parents don't really get people who didn't grow up like them. It's not personal." There it was, not personal. Mocking the woman who raised me alone, who cleaned blood off rich people's floors and still made me feel like I lived in a palace. Not personal. I finally spoke. "You're right," I said quietly. "It wasn't personal. It was classist. and cruel and cowardly. His mouth twitched. Let's not get dramatic, Jess. I almost laughed. Dramatic? Caleb, your mother called my mom a maid with delusions of elegance in front of 200 people. And you laughed. You didn't even flinch. He leaned back like I'd hit him. But I wasn't done. You want to know what's dramatic? I said. The woman who scrubbed toilets so I could get a full ride to Columbia. Being laughed at by people who've never worked a day in their lives. That's dramatic. That's operatic. He looked away. I stared at him hard. You say they don't get people like her, but here's the thing, Caleb. I am her. I'm her daughter. I'm her legacy. And if you don't get her, you don't get me. He didn't fight me. That's what made it worse. No begging, no defense, no, I made a mistake. Just a slow nod, a long breath, and a quiet, okay, if that's how you feel. And just like that, my marriage ended 18 hours after it began. I called my mom from the parking lot. I think I just got divorced, I said. She was silent for a long time. Then, you want me to come get you? I choked out a laugh. I think I need pancakes first. I'll bring syrup. We stayed in a cheap motel that night, ate pancakes off styrofoam, and watched reruns of The Golden Girls. We laughed too hard at the jokes and cried too loud at the quiet parts. She didn't say, I told you so. She just held my hand. Maybe love doesn't look like tuxedos and centerpieces, she said softly. Maybe it looks like walking away from people who don't know how to love. And I thought of how Caleb looked at me. Not angry, not sad, just indifferent. And I realized he never protected me. He just tolerated me. The news spread fast. Some people called me brave. Some called me dramatic. Some said I overreacted. But the ones who mattered, they understood instantly. I got a card in the mail from my high school art teacher. It just said, your mother once showed up to parent night with paint on her jeans and tears in her eyes. She told me, my kid deserves the world, and I don't know how to give it to her, but I'm gonna try. She gave it to you. You're just making sure no one takes it away. The first thing I did after landing back in Seattle was hand my mom a cup of tea and tell her the truth. Not the version I'd spun to protect her. Not the polite lie I'd told over FaceTime the night of the wedding. Oh, you didn't miss much. Just a lot of dancing. Number this time, I told her everything. How they laughed at her accent. How his aunt mimicked her voice like she was a cartoon. How they made jokes about how she probably cleans houses. How Mark stood there, not saying a word, while they gutted my mother in front of 204 guests and crystal centerpieces. I expected her to cry. She didn't. She just stared into her cup like she was watching memories float to the surface. Then she said in a voice as calm as ever, I cleaned toilets for 11 years. Those hands bought you your first violin, and that was it. No tantrum, no guilt trip, no drama. Just the quiet dignity of a woman who knew what she was worth, even if others didn't. But I think something inside me cracked open after that, something fierce, because I couldn't stop replaying the way they laughed, the way Mark pretended he didn't hear it, the way his mother smirked every time someone brought up how charmingly rustic I was. I wasn't even rustic. I had a dual master's. I ran a grant program. I read Murakami on the weekends, but none of that mattered to them. All they saw was the immigrant's daughter. And suddenly, I wasn't just ashamed of how they treated my mom. I was ashamed I'd ever thought I needed their approval. So I started peeling back the layers. Mark had always made jokes that stung a little, like how I was so intense when I talked about social programs, or how my mom's apartment smelled like turmeric and boiled books, or how I should be careful not to wear too much gold because it made me look too ethnic. At the time, I thought it was just awkwardness. Now I realized it was contempt, dressed as charm, and suddenly I couldn't breathe in that marriage. I moved back into my mom's guest room, filed for a quiet annulment, no fanfare. His family sent me a single email. "We hope you'll reconsider this overreaction. You're young, you'll learn." I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself into work. My department had just been awarded a federal grant to pilot trauma-informed education in underserved districts. I threw myself into the logistics, budgets, training modules, anything to distract myself from the rage simmering just under my skin. But the moment that changed everything, it came unexpectedly. In a hallway, outside a school auditorium in Tacoma, I was reviewing a roster with a school administrator when someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Ms. Farrow?" I turned. A tall woman in her 50s stood there with a clipboard and soft eyes. "Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say, I saw your name on the donor roster. The program you funded helped my daughter stay in school. She's graduating in June." I blinked, because I'd never seen the money as mine. I'd always seen it as a vehicle, something to move forward, to reach, to fix. But in that moment, I realized something. They had laughed at my mother, but they didn't know who she raised, and they definitely didn't know what we were building. My mom, the same woman they mocked, had given me every tool I needed to build something bigger than their table. She didn't raise me to fit in. She raised me to stand up. So that night, I did something impulsive. I posted a photo, just one. It was an old picture, my mom in a janitor uniform, wiping down a desk. She was smiling. I wrote a caption. This woman was mocked at my wedding for her accent and her job, but her hands bought my education. Her silence taught me to speak, and her sacrifices built a future for kids she's never met. I expected a few likes, maybe a heart from a friend. I didn't expect what came next. The post went viral, thousands of shares, comments from teachers, immigrants, single mothers, first-gen grads, social workers, people who knew exactly what it felt like to be laughed at and to rise anyway. Mark's family saw it. I know they did. His cousin sent me a DM saying, "This feels targeted." It was, and I didn't apologize, because for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't just reacting, I was reclaiming. When Sharon finally called, I knew exactly how the conversation would go. The phone barely rang once before I picked up. Her voice was pinched, defensive. "Madeline, sweetheart, I just think this has gotten so out of hand." I didn't respond. I let the silence do the work. She huffed. "I was hoping we could move past what happened. It was just a misunderstanding. You're newlyweds. Surely you don't want this kind of rift in the family already." I could hear Charles in the background muttering, probably coaching her. They thought this was about me, about a bruised bride. They didn't understand. It was never about me. It was about my mother. "My mom sat quietly while you laughed at her," I said finally. "And you think I'm the one who owes this family peace?" Sharon faltered. "We didn't laugh at her. We were joking. You know how Charles is, and she was dressed so plainly. I thought she was the help. It was an honest mistake." "She handmade that dress," I said. "She skipped buying herself a coat last winter so she could afford that fabric." The silence on Sharon's end turned stiff. "Well, how were we supposed to know? No one told us she was, what, important?" And there it was, that casual cruelty dressed up as cluelessness. "Sharon," I said calmly, "you don't need to move past this, because you're already past it. You'll forget in a week. But my mother won't. She spent her life swallowing shame so I didn't have to taste it. And you tried to feed her a plateful of it in front of 204 people." I took a breath, steady and slow. We're not moving past anything. We're just moving on. 2 days later, Ryan showed up at my mother's doorstep with a small box in hand and tears in his eyes. I was already there. We'd been organizing thank you notes and eating leftover wedding cake in our pajamas. He stood in the entryway, looking like a kid who'd just flunked out of school. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have stopped them." He opened the box. Inside was the hair comb, the one my mother had tucked into my bun the morning of the wedding. A tiny antique pearl piece from her own wedding day. I'd forgotten it in the dressing room in the chaos. Someone had picked it up. Somehow, it made its way into Sharon's handbag. He handed it to my mom, his hands shaking. My mom took it silently. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say anything at all. And I think that was louder than any words she could have spoken. A month passed, then 3. Ryan and I didn't go to Thanksgiving at the Coltons. We hosted our own in our small apartment, filled with warm casseroles and neighbors who brought pie and stories and hugged my mom like she mattered. We toasted to chosen families, and Ryan cried when my mom gave him a hand-knit scarf with his initials stitched into the edge. She didn't say much, just smiled and patted his arm. That's how she is. She won't go for the throat. She'll just wait. And when the truth shows up, she'll stand next to it without flinching. 6 months after the wedding, I received a thick envelope from the Coltons' lawyer. Apparently, Charles was attempting to secure a trademark on my name, for a new branch of his company, trying to capitalize on the wedding buzz. He was selling cookware under the brand Madeline's Table. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Then I published a blog post, just one, about what happened at the wedding. I didn't name names, but the story caught fire. It turned into a podcast episode. Then an op-ed. A few weeks later, someone leaked the video. The toast, the laughter. People saw my mother sitting there, hands folded in her lap, face flushed but still composed, like the queen she is, and they saw what the Coltons did to her. Their brand deals evaporated. Sharon stopped posting her lifestyle reels. The cookware line never launched. The table belongs to me. Last week, I got a message from a woman I'd never met. She said her daughter had watched the clip of my wedding and cried, said it reminded her of her own mom, a quiet woman who was often talked over and overlooked. She asked if she could write about it for a college essay. I said yes, because if even one person sees my mother and finally understands the power of dignity, then maybe it was all worth it. We're expecting now, a little girl. Ryan and I haven't told many people yet, but my mom knows. She's been knitting again. Soft pink booties, tiny cardigans with daisies embroidered along the sleeves. And I think about that night, when she stood up and left a wedding she should have been celebrated at. She didn't ask for justice. She simply became it. So, if you ever find yourself in a room where someone mocks your mother in front of hundreds, with champagne in hand and cruelty dressed as charm, you don't have to shout. You don't even have to stay. Sometimes, the loudest act of love is walking out with the person who loved you first. And when you do, make sure the whole room watches, because grace, when it leaves the room, takes the light with it.